What's going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners. Let's talk about some tight ends for week 2. Who do we have listed as a start? Who do we have listed as a sit? And as always, our accuracy from the previous week. So let's toss up the graphic and take a look at who we hit on and who we missed on. First off, the 62%, not good enough. We got to be around 70% or higher. So we're going to get closer to that this week. I will let you know, though, my accuracy ratings or rankings for tight ends last week. 4th overall in the industry. So even though I missed on a few guys that brought that percentage down, my overall ranking accuracy 4th overall in the industry. So the tight end whisperer is back and raring to go for the 2020 season. Some of those misses there, Goddard. I had Ertz listed as a start, Goddard as a sit. Got those two mixed up. Njoku ended up hitting, even though I had him and Hooper listed as sits. OJ Howard, I had Gronk as a start, OJ Howard as a sit. Got those two mixed up. So that's kind of what brought that average down a little bit. But over on the hit side, I felt like I made some really good calls this week. Hawkinson and Fant both have good weeks. And then Hooper and Hurst, two of the guys that I continue to shy away from. Those were the guys I saw the most comments about last week on the rankings videos and start and sit. A lot of people still are not on board with my thought process with them. Maybe last week brought you a little bit closer, but everybody circle up. Okay, it's circle time. Sit down here on the rug of the tight end whisperer, scoot a little bit closer, and let's dive into some of this week 2 information so we can make the correct decision at the position going into next week. All right, Thursday night football, Bengals at Browns. We're going to be starting with the Bengals tight end, CJ, who's your mama, and he's going to be listed as a sit for me this week. Now, he saw a decent volume last week, but I'm expecting the Cincinnati Bengals to open it up a little bit more. So some of those easier routes that he may have been running last week to kind of get Joe Burrow into the swing of things and moving along might not be there this week because they might be taking some more shots. So he's going to be listed as a sit for me this week. On the flip side, I will run with Austin Hooper as a start this week. No David Njoku, so he might end up being out there more often. And some of those routes Njoku was being asked to run, they might have Hooper run those this week instead. And instead of having him on the line and using him to block a little bit more. I mean, last week, the Bengals gave up 5 receptions on 8 targets and 73 yards to Henry. So I'm thinking that, again, along those lines, we could see Hooper kind of mimic some of those numbers. And if he were to find the end zone, he will be definitely a start this week. But the volume should probably be there considering I'm not loving OBJ this week. Jacksonville at Tennessee. The Jacksonville call is pretty easy for me. Looking at 2 guys, Eifert and O'Shaughnessy, I'm not going to be starting either of those guys. Only 2 combined targets last week. This is not a position that's utilized within the offense. We even saw it last year. They didn't utilize tight end in the receiving game. I thought maybe some of that will carry over to this year. Eifert so far, disappointing. I know some people were kind of high on him and thought that he might be able to be a guy as a late round stash because of his work with offensive coordinator Jay Gruden in the past. However, again, this offense has not utilized the tight end position in a while. I expect that to be kind of the same going forward. For Tennessee, Jonnu Smith, we're going to run with him. He was a start for me last week. He ended up scoring that touchdown. He saw 7 targets in a close game as well. So it wasn't even a game where like they were needing to air it out the entire time. They were staying pretty balanced, and Smith still saw 7 targets, went 4 for 36 and a tutty. So for Smith, I still believe that this is a guy that could have a breakout season. If you watch the game, he is an athlete at the position. He is a guy that can play all over the field. He can make plays all over the field, and he can break some big gains. So those 7 targets are probably going to turn, instead of 4 receptions, start turning into more like 5, 6, 7 receptions. And we could even see those target shares go up if they find themselves in a game where they might be behind and need to play catch up. Carolina at Tampa Bay. And for Carolina, one of my preseason favorites to really go past his ADP was Ian Thomas. But after watching some of the game film from the Carolina game last week, this to me does not appear to be an offense that's going to utilize the tight end position as much as I would have liked to see. Still a lot of targets going to Christian McCaffrey. Robbie Anderson looked really good last week. You still have DJ Moore, and Curtis Samuel saw quite a bit of targets as well. So for Ian Thomas, for me, he's going to continue to be a sit moving forward unless we see this offense have some type of of an injury, or they tried to mix it up a little bit. But again, after watching some of that game film, I don't believe that they are going to be utilizing Ian Thomas as much as myself and others may have liked to see. For Tampa Bay, I'm switching it up this week. I'm going to go with Gronk as a sit and OJ Howard as a start, and here's why. Last week, Gronk only saw 3 targets compared to Howard 6. Now, as Gronk gets back into the game and moving forward after missing all of last year, maybe they start to utilize him a little bit more. Maybe it's one of those things where they're cautiously working him back in. But the thing that I liked about Howard is he played in the slot or out wide 14 of his 37 snaps this past week. Gronkowski only played in the slot or out wide once. And that kind of goes back to some of the offseason thought process where Gronk's coming in to be a blocker. He's coming in to be an extra offensive lineman for them. He's going to be a red zone target. He's going to be a guy that, yes, will make some plays, but OJ Howard, if they play in that 12 personnel with 2 tight end sets, can still get out there quite a bit. So I will still roll with OJ Howard this week. I think a touchdown is more than capable for him against Carolina. I'm going to put him in my lineup. Gronkowski, though, I'm going to leave him out for right now until we see some of that volume start to tick up. Denver at Pittsburgh this week, and last week, Noah Fant with no Courtland Sutton had himself a day. Regardless if Courtland Sutton comes back this week or not, I expect Noah Fant to continue some of that trend. One of those reasons is Jerry Jeudy still looks a little bit raw out there. There's no KJ Hamler, so he's going to continue to be looked at by Tim Patrick. I thought there might be too many weapons around Noah Fant for him to really explode and be another breakout this year. However, with the injury to Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy maybe not being up to speed just yet, and the injury to KJ Hamler, Fant's finding himself in a great position. Now, against the Pittsburgh defense, yes, Pittsburgh has a tough defense. But last week, even though the numbers for Evan Ingram aren't great, you have to keep in mind that he dropped a couple of balls. Had he caught those balls, his stat line from last week would have looked a lot better. And you can utilize Noah Fant in the same way that the New York Giants utilize Evan Ingram. So I expect Noah Fant to still have a good week this week. For Pittsburgh, Eric Ebron is a guy that I thought, could have a little bit of touchdown upside. I ended up playing him last week and listing him as a start, but going forward, probably going to have him as a sit. Did not like what I was seeing in terms of the volume. They are really, really, really utilizing those wide receivers first, and then with the addition of maybe Anthony McFarland to the rotation this week, because of the James Conner injury, we could see maybe a few targets going that way as well. So for Vance McDonald and Eric Ebron, neither of these guys are going to be volume monsters anytime soon. Eric Ebron's still a threat in the red zone, but not really one of those situations where I want to rely on a guy to score a touchdown every single week when there's a lot of other good options out there. The LA Rams will be headed to Philadelphia this week, and Tyler Higbee didn't have the best week last week, but it was still encouraging to see him worked into the game plan and them trying to target him a little bit more often. Also with Gerald Everett, he might be dealing with a little bit of a back issue right now, so we have to keep that in mind. For that reason there, Everett will be a sit for me again this week. Tyler Higbee will be a start for me again this week. Now, last week, the Philadelphia Eagles gave up a 4.37-1 line to Logan Thomas. Now, nothing against Logan Thomas, but if Logan Thomas is able to find the end zone and see some decent plays, there's no reason why Tyler Higbee shouldn't be able to do that as well. Expect him to get a little bit more involved in the game plan this week. For Philadelphia, Goddard and Ertz are both going to be starts for me. Goddard has at least 8 targets in the last 8 games, I believe, dating back to last year. So he's being targeted quite often now in that offense. This is a team that is moving to 12 personnel, maybe not because they want to, but out of necessity. They don't really have any healthy weapons at wide receiver, and this week is going to be a tough matchup against the Rams. One of the reasons I have all the wide receivers listed as sits this week for the Eagles. I mean, Jalen Reagor, maybe he ends up pulling Jalen Ramsey. D-Jax may pull Jalen Ramsey. I'm not really sure. So whoever that is, probably going to be game scripted out a little bit because of that matchup. So I'm going to roll with the tight ends this week because, Wentz needs to throw to somebody, right? It's probably going to be them. And if the offensive line is still banged up, they're going to need to have a lot of quick passes, get the ball out of Wentz's hands quickly, and that's going to go to these tight ends on some of those intermediate plays. For the 49ers and the Jets, I am going to put Kittle and Reed both as starts this week. Now, Reed might not have a very high ceiling unless Kittle is out, but keep in mind, Kittle is dealing with an injury right now. We'll have to keep up on that. Obviously, our injury show here with Dr. Ethan Turner, he'll talk more about that this week, so keep an eye on that as well, so you can get more information regarding the Kittle injury. But I'm still going to play both of them this week. Why? Kittle, if you own him, he's in your lineup. Last year, we saw towards the end of the year, he was a little bit banged up, and there was a game where it was a maybe if he was going to play leading up to game time. And he ended up going off for a huge day, and fantasy owners that sat him, well, they ended up taking an L that week. I'm not doubting George Kittle if he gets on the field. If he's on the field, I am going to play him. So if he's out there, you start him. For Jordan Reed, the reason I've got him listed as a start is, quite honestly, they don't have anybody else. They just signed Mohamed Sanu. Do we really expect him to come in after a few days and have a big target share? Some more 12 personnel, or put Reed on the line and put Kittle out in the slot a little bit more? I think they're going to find a way to get both of these guys on the field. And if Kittle is out for some reason, then not only increases Reed's percentage or his target percentage this week and increases his ceiling. For the Jets, I'm going to list Chris Herndon as a start. 6 receptions on 7 targets, but only 37 yards last week. That's going to continue to build a little bit and build a little bit. So we know the volume is there. The target share is there. We just have to see those yards turn up a little bit more. That's going to happen as Jameson Crowder becomes a weapon that has to be defended a little bit more. When we get Denzel Mims out on the field, when Brashad Perryman starts pulling guys down the field a little bit more. The one question mark is the is the running back situation. Can Frank Gore go out there this week and actually get a little bit of a revenge game against the 49ers and get that run game rolling? If he can, that might open up a little bit more for Herndon. But I'm going to roll with him this week because the volume is there. We just have to wait for the yards to tick up a little bit. If you're thinking about starting him and you have better options, I will roll with that. But I think he's going to be very close to our cutoff this week for the points needed to be listed as a start, and I'm going to go ahead and put him in that category. Buffalo at Miami, Dawson Knox is going to be a sit for me this week. There's just too many targets going out to John Brown and Stephon Diggs, plus Cole Beasley in the slot for Dawson Knox to be a guy that can contribute on a consistent basis. Now, do keep in mind, it sounds like John Brown is limited right now with a little bit of a foot injury. We'll monitor that throughout the week. If John Brown were to miss, then maybe that changes things for Dawson Knox. But on the flip side of that, they play Miami this week. If they can get up big in the first half, we're probably going to see a lot of Zach Moss, Devin Singletary in the second half. So the volume might not be there for him this week anyway. But the foot issue for Brown is something to continue to monitor that could affect Dawson Knox. For the Miami Dolphins, okay, Mike Gesicki is my kryptonite. It doesn't matter what I say about this guy. He does the opposite. It seemed like every single week last year. It happened this week, this year. Listed him as a start, and he put up a dud. So, I'm going to list him as a start again this week. Now, I hate the matchup. I do not like this matchup one bit. I think his ceiling is very low. But the way that they're using him bodes well for a tight end. He's not a hand in the ground type end. He's not a blocking tight end. He a receiving tight end, and that's how they're using him. Last week, 45 of his 62 snaps. He played 45 of 62 snaps. He was in the slot for 32 of those, and he was out wide for 7 of those, and he had a 16.6% target share. So they're targeting him. They're looking at him. They're putting him out in areas that he can win. It just didn't happen. This week, I don't like any of the wide receivers going up against Buffalo. If Gesicki's working in the slot a little bit more, they're finding some different mismatches with him, then potentially he could get some of those looks if the wide receivers are draped all over by the cornerbacks. So I will go with Mike Gesicki again, but we're about another week away from me telling you whatever I say about Mike Gesicki, you do the opposite because it's not working out. Minnesota at Indianapolis, and I was severely disappointed with the tight ends last week for Minnesota. This was a shootout against Green Bay, a game in which they were trailing basically the entire time, and they only targeted Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith Jr. a combined 3 times. Now, I thought for sure that they were going to utilize these tight ends more this year, and I thought we would see it in week 1, and it didn't happen. And it was part of the reason why I was kind of off Adam Thielen last week, because I thought for sure we would see more Irv Smith Jr. It didn't end up happening, though. So for both of them, I'm going to sit both of them until I can see they get rolling a little bit more with the game plan and they're included more in it. For Jack Mother and Doyle, I've got them listed as a sit this week as well. The safety net is there, so I think he sees a decent amount of volume. But he's going to lack some of those big plays, some of those high ceiling plays that make him a weekly must start. Those are kind of going elsewhere right now. Paris Campbell, we think, is a guy that really could be in for a huge week too. Obviously, you still have T.Y. Hilton. He's kind of going to be the third option on that team. But even Jonathan Taylor last week saw 6 targets. So they're even including him a little bit more than they are Jack Doyle right now. So even though I do like Doyle the rest of the season, and I think he'll have some matchups that we can start him in, this week will be a no for me. For Detroit at Green Bay, I'm going to start Hockenson this week, but it doesn't come without some reservations, and it doesn't come without some worry about his inclusion in this offense. Last week, no Kenny Golladay. He only saw a 12% target share, and he only played on 50 of 78 snaps. Heart to heart, real quick, Headliner Nation. Why do the Lions keep drafting these guys that they don't use? Why would you spend a first-round pick on TJ Hockenson and only give him 12 targets and only play him 50 of 78 snaps in a game in which your number one wide receiver is out? It's part of the reason I thought it was a horrible pick when it happened, and it's still probably a horrible pick. So, will he continue to break our hearts? We'll see. Hopefully this week, the targets come a little bit more, and he gets utilized a little bit better. On the other side of it, though, for Green Bay, I'm not playing any of these tight ends. I'm not worried about it. They're not utilized. They're not looked at. Last week, the 3 wide receivers were a huge part of the game. Aaron Jones is a receiver out of the backfield. They're at best the 4th or 5th option right now for Aaron Rodgers. And as we've seen over the last several years, even with Jimmy Graham there, they're not really utilizing tight ends anyway. Atlanta at Dallas this week, and I'm going to double up on that Hayden Hurst sit from last week and list him as a sit again this week. Dallas is very athletic at the linebacker position. Yes, Leighton Vander Esch is going to miss some time now, but they're still very athletic back there, and it allows them to cover tight ends. I mean, last week they held Higbee to 3 catches and 40 yards. They can probably do the same thing to Hayden Hurst, and Hayden Hurst isn't really even viewed as a top 2 option on this team right now. He was number 4 last week after Russell Gage. So for Hayden Hurst, I've got to see it. I'm not playing him until I see it. He was a guy that I wasn't on this season, and I'm not going to be on him until I see him break out in this offense and given a better target share. On the other side, obviously, we had the injury last week to Blake Jarwin. That's going to lead Dalton Schultz to be our tight end for Dallas moving forward, but not going to be starting him. Too many options on this team to be giving targets to Schultz. New York Giants and Chicago Bears. I'm going to go ahead and go with Evan Ingram again this week. The volume was there for him last week, but unfortunately, he just had some buttery fingers, ate some of that popcorn before the game, and dropped the football a couple of times. I'm going to go right back to him this week. Again, 7 targets on Monday night against Pittsburgh. He's going to get a decent amount of those targets again this week. Even if Golden Tate were to be back, might still be a little bit slowed, whatever it may be, Evan Ingram's still a big part of that offense. For Chicago, though, I'm not going to start Kmet and I'm not going to start Graham, but I am going to tell you to keep a little bit of an eye on Graham. He did see 7 targets last week. Decent amount of targets. However, it's still not a position that they've utilized. You know, last year they were supposed to utilize Trey Burton. Obviously, he ended up getting hurt, but the year before they were supposed to utilize Trey Burton. I mean, they just haven't really done anything with the tight end position since Matt Nagy took over. So, for me personally, I'm skipping out on the tight end position in Chicago right now. We'll continue to monitor Jimmy Graham. If he sees more of that volume or continues to see a decent volume rate, then maybe we have to list him in some matchups where he's got a little bit better ceiling. Washington and Arizona this week. I'm not going to roll with Logan Thomas again, okay? But we're close. We're really close, ladies and gentlemen. I just don't love the matchup with Arizona this week. They're very athletic on defense. They're a team that can keep up with Logan Thomas. Heck, they might put Isaiah Simmons on him. Isaiah Simmons is a great coverage linebacker. But, again, we are going to wait on Logan Thomas. Because last week he played 52 of their 70 snaps. He played 24 of those in the slot and 4 out wide. And he had a 26% target share, which led the team. So Logan Thomas is a guy we're going to keep our eye on in the coming weeks. I mentioned him a couple of weeks ago in one of my updates that I did for training camp that this was a guy that we might need to be worrying about at some point this season. Good game last week. I missed on him. I'm going to go with a sit again this week, though, because I don't love the matchup against Arizona. And you know what? I went ahead and put Dan Arnold on there for you Dan Arnold truthers this week. But again, he's not doing anything, ladies and gentlemen. Arizona doesn't utilize the tight end position. Don't get cute. Don't stash him. Don't worry about him. Drop him to waivers. Find somebody else. KC and Los Angeles, well, this is an easy one. It's yes to both of them. We're starting them. Do you start Travis Kelce? Yes. Do you start Hunter Henry? Yes. Both of them. Hunter Henry led his team in yards last week. He's going to continue to be targeted by Ty God Taylor. And then, of course, Travis Kelce is a god. So you start both of them. That was easy. Baltimore at Houston, and I loved seeing the uptick in percentage of snaps for Mark Andrews last week, up to 70% of the snaps, which was more around 50 last year. Talked about it this offseason. I said Mark Andrews has a legitimate shot to be a guy that could be the tight end one, and week one was off to an excellent start for him. So continue to start him. Big playmaker, big touchdown guy. The regression for the touchdowns isn't there yet. Keep playing him every game. For Houston, Akins and Fells, each week they're going to have touchdown upside, but they're not going to have any volume upside. So very rarely are you going to catch me playing either of these guys unless we look at it and say, hey, this is a really great matchup. This is why I'm going to roll with one of them. But even then, it's a roll of the dice because either of them could perform at any given time. Akins gets a touchdown last week, making him a start. Unfortunately, I missed on that one because I had Fells instead, but this week I'm going to sit both of them. For New England, only one tight end saw any time of targets last week, and that was Izzo, and he only saw two of them. So again, this is not going to be a position they may be utilizing very often with the players that they have there. We'll continue to monitor it, though. I mean, Cam Newton only threw 19 passes last week. If he gets into a situation where he has to throw more, like this week against Seattle, we could see those guys maybe see some more targets. On the other side for Seattle, though, this is going to be a nightmare to figure out. Disley, Olsen, and Hollister all saw snaps and all saw targets last week. Olsen's the one that ended up scoring the touchdown. That's what made him a miss for me last week. Scores the touchdown, becomes a start. Unfortunately, I don't think you're going to be able to choose every single week. This is something that we have to keep looking at. If Olsen we see as the guy that, hey, he's scoring every week or every couple of weeks, then yeah, maybe we need to start thinking about starting him. But if the volume's going to be distributed evenly, if we're going to see the snaps be even, those type of things, I don't want to mess with it. There's other guys that have just as good as an upside. This is not a matchup that I want to try and work out every single week. So for now, they're all going to be sits. New Orleans at Las Vegas. Jared Cook, again, a guy that Drew Brees relied on last week and will probably continue to do so moving forward, especially with no Michael Thomas. So going up against Las Vegas, Cook is going to be a guy that you're going to have in your lineup and will be pretty decently high for me this week. And with Darren Waller, saw lots of volume last week. Again, even with the added weapons around him, still saw a good amount of volume. We want to see him score some more touchdowns. This week, he might be without Henry Ruggs. If there's no Henry Ruggs, that kind of helps a little bit more volume go back to him as well. But Derek Carr and him have that connection. He's going to be a guy that we start on a weekly basis because he's going to see tons of balls coming his way. All right, there you have it. Headliner Nation, my start and sit predictions for the tight end position for week 2 of the NFL season. Do me a favor. If you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe button. If you have questions about any of the tight ends, leave them in the comments below. Keep in mind, we can't get to all of the comments. If you want to guarantee responses to your questions, you can do so over on Patreon. Use the link in the description of the video down below. $10 a month, you can sign up. All of the questions will be answered that you can send us. And as always, if you appreciate the content, hit that like button. Headliner Nation, hope you all are doing well out there. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.